Sarah Climenhaga, welcome to the Middleweight Podcast. I am very excited for this conversation with you.
It is great to meet you, Matthew, or to meet you in this way in this podcast because as I mentioned to you, I've loved listening to your past episodes. So I'm really thrilled to be able to have this discussion with you and be on the podcast today. Thank you.
Well, the topic of our conversation today is going to be around what's called the work. And some people might be familiar with the work, some people might be brand new to it. And so we're going to dive into what that is, how it can help us to more effectively deal with stress and suffering in our life, and also as participants in the collective, in the world. So we're going to get into all that, but just by way of introduction, I'm wondering if you could share with our listeners a little bit about how you came to the work. What was your story around that?
Perfect. Yes, I'd love to share that. And just to preface it with just the overall basic thing of the work is living with reality and not fighting it. And knowing that reality is reality and our thoughts are our thoughts and they're not the same thing. So I came to the work because I was about age 30. I had always just, like a lot of people, gotten into a lot of angst about personal relationships. There was nothing big and traumatic in my life, but I just would take things so personally, particularly with regards to friendship. I was always feeling let down. There was a lot of drama in my friendships and my life around that. And I was getting married and I was really obsessing over the guest list and who was going to come and were people committed enough and celebrating me enough and all this. It was really making my experience pretty unpleasant. And I was a total bridezilla, like with some of my guests. And my mom kind of took me aside in one particular time that I was so upset. And she said, I just came across this book. It's called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. And it's all about how your thoughts are not your reality. And I really hadn't really read too many books like that at all. And I just picked it up and looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, what? Like, this is amazing. And so I just started questioning with this method that we'll go through later, you know, seeing my thoughts about, did someone like me? Did someone reject me? Did people owe me something? Like, does it, if they do this, does it mean that? And just questioning my thoughts. And I found so much freedom when I did that, that it was like, oh, okay, great. I finally have a way to deal with my upset that's not either quashing it and telling myself I'm wrong or lashing outwards and being unkind to other people. Because it was kind of always those two options. I get mad at someone and accuse them, or I bury it and tell myself, I'm unreasonable, I'm wrong, I'm too sensitive, all of those things. So it was just lovely to have this method. And so I kind of just used it with a pen and paper. That's how you do this practice. It's like a meditation. It's like a meditation with pen and paper. So, but then I guess maybe 10 years later or so, I was kind of going through just mild depression, not really clinical depression, but mild, just unhappy a lot. So I looked up the website, thework.com. I'd never really looked it up before. That's related to the book. And Byron Katie's website. Anyways, I found facilitators, people who actually guide you through the process of the work. And I thought, I'll try that. And that was my next sort of quantum leap into seeing the difference between my thoughts and seeing how to question them in a really open way. And so I worked with a facilitator from time to time on different issues that would bother me, including not just personal relationships, but despair over the planet, which was kind of another theme in my life. Despair over the environment, over the planet, over inequity, all the kind of issues that we care about. So she worked with me on that. And then the next thing that happened in my evolution towards, this doing this work and offering this work was 2020. And how it affected me, the changes of 2020 was I was at war with, I wasn't so much afraid of the virus. I was at war with the policies around the virus. And it was obsessing me and consuming me. And I was living in my own panic, fear, drama, hatred, polarization that I was judging in the world around me, but I was living it myself. And so then I decided to, I had, time on my hands inside. I decided to do a 5-day workshop offered by a couple of Byron Katie facilitators. And that was just like next level again. And so it's just kind of the self-awareness is just, you only can be as self-aware as you are. And every time you learn something new, whether it's through meditation or whatever your practice is, you develop another level of self-awareness. And so every time I become a little more self-aware of automatic conditioning, unconscious judgments, and bias, it's like my world opens up a little bit more and I just feel that much freer. And I start to recognize when I'm leaving self-awareness and going into the world of the mind, which is different from the world of reality. And so to me, the work, I learned about it, 24 years ago, and I am continuing to learn about it. And I'm so excited for it to continue to show me new things about life.
Hmm. Thank you for that, Sarah. So you mentioned that this really important kind of distinction or um, way for us to really understand the work is that our thoughts are not reality. And so I wanted to dive just a little bit deeper into that. And I know for some people, especially maybe coming from a psychology background, this might sound familiar to them like, oh, yeah, I know thoughts aren't reality. Like we just change our thoughts and we have different thoughts and we have a different reality. But what do you mean by that? That thoughts are not reality? And from your understanding, like how is that different than maybe how we might work with our thoughts with a therapist, for example, like just trying to think positive thoughts or something like that?
Yeah, it's like it's both extremely obvious that thoughts aren't our reality, and it's also extremely hard to see when our thoughts aren't reality. Because, like, I'm sitting here with you, and so the reality is just my hands on the table, like, I see you right now. That's the only thing that's real in this micro moment. But there is so much going in my mind that seems real, like, oh, this podcast will be broadcast. And oh, my dog might bark. I was talking before the podcast about, oh no, I hope my dog doesn't bark. There's all these thoughts in my mind that seem kind of real, like, oh yeah, there is a dog on my lap that could, but none of that's real. The only thing that's real is this moment. And so when it comes to something like, let's say, a social issue, we could say, oh, the planet's warming up, or there's pollution in the oceans, or there's war somewhere. And it could be like, well, that's real. Like, you can't say that's not real. But in my experience of life, I don't even know what's real other than I'm here experiencing this. And so that's not to be in denial of what else is going on in the world, but it's to recognize it's in my mind. My mind's drawing a picture of what's happening in the world and what's happening outside of this room. And that's not a real picture. And so connecting to what's real lets me respond to what's real. So, like, I can talk to you, or I can worry about what you're thinking about me. Am I doing a good job on the recording? How's this going to be? Like, those are two different worlds. And if I forget what's real and what's you, I can't respond fluidly to life, and I don't have as good of an experience. And so the work with the questions that I'll share with you, it really crystallizes like what's real, what's in reality. What are you touching? What's this moment? And what's the future? And what's the past? And where does it live in your body? And how are you experiencing it? So to me, I haven't done conventional psychotherapy or therapy. So I don't really know what it is to contrast the two. My understanding of it is sort of like you explore your past and you talk about it, you see your patterns, and then can help you kind of undo them. But I don't really know exactly how it works. But I just do know that with the work, it's like no matter what the situation that is troublesome, you don't kind of deal with the details of the situation. You look at the thoughts that in the body experiencing you're having with the situation and how you're interpreting it. And the guide, like the person who's, if you're doing it with a guide, the work, they are never going into your situation as if it's real. They're questioning your thoughts and how they're impacting you and helping you see how your thoughts are impacting you. So it's, I don't know, you know, you have a whole different area. I'd love to know from your perspective, since you've done some Byron Katie work yourself or learned about it, what do you see as the difference? I'm interested.
Mhm. The really it is a subtle difference kind of on the surface, but from an experiential level, in my experience, it's been a very powerful difference. And you're right that I've been practicing some of this work and it's impacted my life in a way that is kind of hard to describe in comparison to like conventional modalities that I've also, been practicing as well. But the distinction I see there with the thoughts is that in traditional therapy, in cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, you might take a thought and you might question it. And I ask my clients this, like, how do you know that that thought is true? Or can we think of any counter evidence to that thought? So there is a process of having some inquiry there, of sometimes changing the thought in cognitive therapy. With the work, it's more of a process, it's more of like a meditation. And you bring this awareness and sort of this more of this deeper knowing as you question the thought that that thought may not necessarily be true. And then additionally, it takes you through different layers and sort of where you end up. And this is really the cool part for me is seeing how the thought that typically we have other people is just a projection from our own mind, and how the opposite is typically true. And so I've just, through my experience, have kind of arrived at a different place and have also been able to see how much the world is a projection of what's actually happening inside of our head, especially as it relates to relationships with other people. All the things that we judge about other people is really the things that we are, and the things that we're
Hmm.
judging ourselves on.
Hmm.
And that's been sort of a difference for me. I'll say that. And then also just how the work has impacted my relationships with people is something that I've never been able to um, really cultivate from psychotherapy. Just as far as being able to be okay, completely okay and at peace with whatever other people are thinking about me, about themselves, whatever, and leaving their experience to them, owning my own experience. And that has just altered my relationships so much, whether other people realize it or not, at least my experience of them. And has taught me that also. I think the best way sometimes to really help other people is actually just to not be in their business and allow them to experience their own growth on their own. So that was a long answer, but that's sort of how
No,
I see it.
that's it's so profound when you can see the difference between being in someone else's world. And I think with a lot of like the work is a very complementary to any modality, whether it's psychotherapy or conventional meditation or other religions. But it's so profound. It kind of the work to me, once you've practiced it, like you have, it stops you from thinking about what they're as soon as you notice that you're thinking about what they're doing wrong, what they need to change, or even why they're acting the way they are, like it stops you from being in their world and coming back to your world where you have so much power and opportunity. And so then it, like you say, it helps your relationship with the other person. There's something else that came to me while you were talking that I don't know if it's a difference or it's certainly an aspect of the work, which is the turnarounds of the work are kind of like the cognitive behavioral therapy you're talking about, where you look at something from several angles and say, is it really true? Like, what about this? What about that? And just before you do this, the turnaround of the work, the cognitive aspect, you really look at how does it feel when I believe it? Like, what's my experience? And really see it. And it's amazing what you'll see, even though you've just experienced going through, the suffering with your thought. But when you look at it as a scientist, kind of, you see, wow, look at all the things that happen when I believe the thought. And then when you look at, okay, now try it on without the thought. And that can be a bit of a, challenge. Like, but I've always thought, that I need to save the ocean or like whatever it is. Try it on without that thought. And you just experience for a moment the present moment when you try something on without the thought. You just experience, I'm sitting in a chair, like, oh, it's so comfortable to, to feel the breeze on my like so you experience it's almost like you're showing your conditioning, you're showing your ego, you're showing your inner child, whatever way you describe this other part of us that gets stuck in our thoughts. We're showing them this is what it feels like when we believe it. This is what it feels like when we don't believe it.
Hmm.
And so it makes it kind of easier to go, oh, okay. And often, especially like, let's say with a social issue or with a relationship issue, we can see that when we believe it, are we changing anything for the better? Is it having a good impact on our relationship? Are we making our son do the chores that we're so furious he hasn't done? Is that what's happening? And then without the thought, like what's happening? And so it also kind of guides us to an incentive to live in reality, by
Hmm.
experiencing those two different ways.
Hmm. So you gave the example like about, our oceans are being polluted and yeah, maybe the thought that, okay, I have to do something about that. Um, so what would be kind of the benefit if someone's listening and they're like, well, why would I want to just not think that or not believe that if that's what's happening? How does that actually benefit me? How does that benefit the world? What would you say to that, Sarah, around, trying on the thought and then trying on our experience without it? Why is that something that we might want to play with if the world's actually suffering?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it's totally been a journey for me. So let's just take the vortex came into my mind, that trash vortex in the ocean. And so when I first started doing the work, it was like, oh, great, I can make all those problems disappear. Like, just question them, and then I don't have to believe in the ocean vortex anymore. And that was a helpful first step, just to take some of that load off my shoulders. But as it passed by, as have gone through it, it's like, to me, the benefit, especially for people who care so passionately about this and really want to make the world, like, live according to the vision that feels beautiful for them. Um, that questioning, the great ocean, the vortex shouldn't be there, or I need to fix it, or people should stop dumping plastic, or any of these thoughts that could be associated with that. Um, it's seeing the difference between whatever's out there and what's in my mind. So the vortex, the trash vortex in my mind is not the same as what's out there. And me living with it or judging people is, when I look at how do I react when I believe the thought, I see that I don't like other people. I see that I feel guilt and shame in my life. I see that I give up. Like, I can't move forward. And it might be different for all of us, and not everyone's experience is different. But if we look, and if it's like believing that thought is filling me with energy, and it's getting me out there, and it's making me embrace the world and find solutions together, then hey, let's just keep it, right? But for a lot of people, those thoughts about war or trash, the thoughts themselves are getting in the way of action. And if I really care about that vortex, like, there's nothing that's stopping me from getting up and getting on a boat and going out there and picking some of it up, or doing it here, or whatever. Like, if it's really important to my present life, I could do that. But if I'm not doing something about it, because there's other things that are important in my life, like raising my child, or planting a tree in my backyard, or going out to a Earth Day cleanup, or like, there's a lot of things in my present life that also want my attention. I can look and see, well, do I want to live in the suffering of the imaginary thing in my mind, or do I want to go to where I think that thing is and act over there where it really is? Or do I want to pay attention to what's in my life and and experience compassion and love and understanding, and create space for new ideas that could surface from me or from someone else? So it's really like, when we are, to me, when I'm believing a stressful thought about the environment or social justice or war or anything that I react against, I'm not actually interacting with that stuff in real life. I'm I'm only interacting it within my mind, and it's polluting my internal experience, and it's polluting the people around me, because I'm living in suffering. So if I really want to clear up pollution, then always I do it first here inside me. Next, I'm able to do it with the people around me. And then if I feel I have the joy and the energy, I could go out to that issue. And I mean, a lot of people probably like me, it's like the vortex, it's like the Middle East, it's like Russia, Ukraine, it's like a nuclear power plant. Like there are so many things, and I probably cannot do each of them. So by clearing my mind of what I don't need to carry, I can really focus on the present. And if any of those big issues do really call me, I can act on them and
Mm.
see where I could actually be of service rather than living in that polluted war, um, war kind of anger, that ugly world that I is inside my mind. And by the way, that I don't create. This is something else about the work is, this idea that we could change our thoughts. My experience is I can't change my thoughts and I didn't create them, but I can inquire into them and I can look at them.
Mm.
And so whatever destruction is arising from within me, it's okay. I'm not creating it, but if I look at it, I look at the pollution, I inquire about it frees me to interact with the real world that's right in front of me. And there's so many beautiful opportunities and so much to be grateful for in the real world.
Mm. I was watching one of your videos yesterday, and you were posing this question: what is keeping me from being happy right now? Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you just elaborate on that question and how people can work with that? Because it brings us back to all the stuff, all the beliefs that are just getting in the way of like what's actually happening in this moment.
Yes. So I've been using that question for myself a lot. To as another way of tuning into the present because there's always many thoughts going in our mind, so it's kind of like, well, right now what is it like? Is it is it I'm upset at something that somebody just said to me? Is it that I'm tired but I feel like I can't stop? Is it that, yeah, I have a big to-do list and I'm really paralyzed by it? So it's like, what's keeping me from happiness just in this moment? And the word happiness is, a loaded word. It could just be what's keeping me from peace, from contentment, from relaxation, just from ease. So whatever is the state, that we would like to have, what's keeping us from that? And if an external thing comes to mind, we can still use that. It's like, well, I'm unhappy because, war is happening. And then we just kind of bring it right down. Okay. So is that what it is? Okay, well, we could question that right now. And because taking that moment to question whatever that is can bring us back again, back in line with reality, where things are easier, where there are possibilities, where there is peace. And then we can move forward. So we don't always have the time to meditate right then or to do a full questioning like you and I have just done. But we do have time to notice what's happening for us. And just noticing can really, keep us in connection with reality. If I'm in the middle of like, sometimes I have my family over for a big meal at holidays or whatever. If I'm in the middle of cooking and I'm like super duper stressed, I can be like, okay, I'm worried that people think I'm taking too long. I'm afraid because they're eating too many snacks, they're not going to be hungry for the main meal or whatever. Like I can kind of go through the list of what's wearing me down, and then I can just be aware of it and
Hmm.
then just take a breath and keep going. And know that if anything really bothers me, like if I'm like, you know, that person always X, Y, and Z, I know, okay, I could work on that later because there might be something I
Hmm.
can learn from that. So it's just, yeah, it puts you in touch with your state. It helps you could bring yourself to a better state if you have the time, or at least to a more aware state. And if you don't have the time, it lets you um, know what you could work on later. And it's just again, and at the very worst thing, like the there's no bad there's no, to me, bad aspect of asking that question at the, I'm trying to, I'm kind of conscious of like, I don't want to promise happiness, right? Like, just do this and then you'll be happy. But it's more like, if you ask that question, taking a pause in our life is just never a bad thing, whether it's for 1 second or an hour. Just taking a pause to check in, not to put pressure, not to be like, why aren't I happy right now? It's not that. It's more just like, oh, is there anything in the way for me right now? Like, what's going on for me? And just looking around. And that is just a break for your mind, for your body, gives you a chance to take a breath, reconnect, reground. It's just on its own, just doing that is going to have a benefit for you. And the sky's the limit for how big that benefit could be.
Hmm. I've been using this practice recently. That is, can I deal with what's happening right now in this moment? And so that brings me into the present moment. And often I realize that all the things that I'm stressing about are not happening right here. This is person sitting in room. There's all this beautiful light coming in right now. It's quiet, it's peaceful, like everything is good. But then also I recognize that I am having a stressful thought. And so I maintain that question, can I deal with what's happening right now? And yes, I'm feeling stressed. I can deal with this. Like I realize that I'm not dealing with the thing in the future, but I'm dealing with the thought of it. And then I ask myself, can I cope with that? Can I cope with this stress? And that brings me into a totally different space than being believing that I'm in a different moment than I really am
Reality.
in reality. Exactly. So the thoughts are almost part of the reality for me, but that it grounds me in some separation from it, and that okay, I'm just experiencing the thoughts as part of my reality right now, but that's not my I'm not um fused with that reality.
Exactly. You're just giving yourself that little bit of distance. And I don't even know if Matthew, if it was you that said this and something else I was listening to, if I heard it somewhere else, but this question, am I safe? And it's kind of like a way of honoring your belief. So if you're, really in the grips of a stressful thought or idea, just checking in, am I safe? Like honors that. It's not, it's because it can be easy. I did this when I first started out the work. I just contradicted myself. As soon as a stressful thought, I was like, no, that's wrong. It's you, and blah, blah, blah. Like, but it's kind of like, okay, I hear you. I hear you stress. Am I safe? I'm just going to make sure and see if I am, because you are a good warning system. That's what you're designed for. So let me just check if I'm safe. Then once I know I'm safe, then I can do exactly what you just said. It's like, okay, now how am I going to cope with this thought? How am I going to cope with this way of being? Do I need to walk outside? Do I need a drink of water? Do I need a nap? Do I need to just keep going because that's my only option right now? But like you say, it's like check out if you're safe, honor your belief because it's there for a reason, and then move forward now with that new relationship with the belief that you described so perfectly. I'm interested in talking just for a minute, maybe about this idea of happiness, personal happiness and peace versus, what's going on in the world. Because I think a lot of, and I still hold this a little bit myself, there's a lot of feeling in the, world of people who are active and trying to make things better in the world that, you know, taking care of yourself or being happy or being at peace is really wrong when other people are suffering. Like it's wrong. And that's something that really I think is sort of almost an ongoing question to keep checking in. And does it does it help the famine victim? Does it help, the lost dog? Does it help the sea turtle? Like if I'm suffering, like does it? And and just imagine, just kind of imagine, even if you are suffering, what do you want from the outside world? Do you want them to stay over there and suffer, or do they want to be like, oh my gosh, like I love you? And like I know sometimes when I'm unhappy and I see kids playing, I'm like, "Oh, I'm so glad they're happy at least." Like
Hmm.
I would never want the kids on the playground to be depressed because I'm depressed. I'm so glad that they can be happy while I'm depressed. And so, and there's such a difference between happiness and taking away from other people. And our happiness and joy and love, it doesn't take away from people who are suffering. It doesn't. And again, if we don't believe it, we can question that and see if it's true or not. And usually, the more at peace and content and accepting, the more possibility we see. And it's so tricky to make positive change if you're against your if you see people as adversaries. It's just, how are they ever going to come on board if we're judging them? How are they ever going to change if we're judging them? How are we ever going to be a model of light and beauty if we're in suffering? And I think of bicycle riding. I've ridden my bike for my whole life, and in my 20s I was full of road rage, and I just had to tell every driver what they were doing wrong, and just get so mad at them and think cars don't belong on the road, and just have a lot of anger in me. I'm pretty sure I didn't change any driver's mind who I got angry at. And when I feel good biking, it's just like, oh, now that I just embrace the joy and the freedom of bicycling, like, I think I look like a happy person. And I know I would always contrast my husband and I, because he biked as well. And he wasn't just so politically invested in cycling as me. He biked to hockey, carried all his hockey equipment. And so, like, several people stopped driving to hockey and started biking to hockey because they were inspired by Paul, not because he was telling them they were wrong or lording it over them or anything. He wasn't even thinking about it. He was just like, this is a good way to get to hockey. And whereas for me, with all my rage, like, I don't know how many people I influenced. So I really do feel this, like, it really helps. We kind of hold on to our suffering when we unconsciously believe that it's helping the world. And I just think we could keep questioning that, because I'm just not sure that it does.
That's really profound because that means that potentially, all of our efforts and energies to try to change the world, just possibly, is actually just maintaining this same dynamic. Whereas if we were to, I don't want to say let go, because I'm not saying that we're just being passive, but as you
Right.
say, like showing up from a place of, I don't know, of joy or taking care of ourselves and wanting other people, trusting that other people will be happy, something like that. Then I wonder if that creates sort of a different reality for us. If the world really is kind of an image of what's happening for us internally, if you're running around your bike and or wherever, just angry at people, you're going to get an angry response back. You're
Yes.
going to get more pushback and resistance and antagonism. Whereas if you're running around on your bike or you're running around the world and you're not trying to change people, you're accepting them from who they are, and you're coming with a sense of love. I wonder if you would not see more love reflected back as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did the work on concrete. Trees are better than concrete, something like that, because I was feeling so badly about some paving I was seeing. And after I did the work, it's like I'm noticing all the places where green is coming up. Like, I'll be on the highway and there'll be the tiniest little crack of, like, seemingly inhospitable, barren concrete, and up is coming all of these plants. And so, it's like, okay, did I create that? Did I create that? That's a manifestation, metaphysical question. But what's true is that I suddenly see so much more life around me. And then that gives me ideas for possibilities. And the other thing that it can do when we have our hearts open like that is we can see more love, we can see more beauty, we can see more possibilities. And it really isn't all on our shoulders. Like, we can really have a lot of impact on our immediate life. And if we can't, like, I always want to be the president, I always want to be the prime minister, I always want to be the CEO, and changing it at that level. But if that's not my job in life, I don't have to do that job. Like, it's like we're a planet of so many people and we're all doing it together. And that's another thing I think when we get so stuck in our belief about how the world should be or that the world needs to change, we don't know if the world needs to change. Like we don't know if the world needs to be better. I don't know. Is planet Earth better than Jupiter, like or Neptune or like the moon? Like I don't know. I don't know. But what I know is what I like in my own life, and that's the one I'm responsible for. And I don't have to go colonize Mars and bring oxygen to Jupiter. Like I don't have to, I don't, it's kind of like seeing where where we can have impact and then letting go of, and again, like you said, it's not letting go, it's inquiring to see if we do have a role or not. And if we don't have to carry it mentally. We
Mhm.
just don't have to carry it mentally. We can be fully in our life, living out the vision that we believe is beautiful and questioning it when we see somewhere that we think it's not. Just questioning that part.
Mhm. It's such a radical difference from, I think, how most people walk around and view, just for all of us human beings, how we think about the world and how we change the world and how we need to exert some sort of force on the world and manipulate and control things that are happening out there. It almost just feels like just a big shock to the system thinking about showing up just in our own life and takes a little bit of faith and courage. And I wonder if we're not kind of transitioning into some new paradigm of for how that, you know, for shaping the world through that different way of being. But I think that's also, I don't know, be in the unknown.
Yeah, and this unity that we're all a part of, even like it's like if I want world peace, like I when it's in me, it might be in the world. I don't know.
Hmm.
Like if I want no more pollution and just vibrancy, like when that's fully in me, it might be in the world. And so it's like just keep finding it when it's not, when there's garbage in my head, when there's hatred in my head, when there's war in my head. Like, let's do that and then step forward with that energy. And who knows what will happen. And then if we ever think that seems like the easy way out, that seems like copying, all those things that can come in with the mind, like great, let them in and just let's question them one by one
Hmm.
and just keep
Hmm.
moving. And we can do both. We can be our, we can still be our activist self and with whatever judgments we have, we can do that. And we can check in with our inner world and we might find the balance shifting one way or another sometimes, but like, let's just not forget how important this planet and this world, like within us is, and how we really have so much ability right here in ourselves.
Brilliant. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to take us through an exercise in doing the work. And maybe for this exercise, I can volunteer something that a belief that I have. And I would just really encourage listeners while we work through this, someone may not be able to relate to what I'm saying, but to really try to insert themselves in the questions that you pose and maybe to think about something that's stressful for them. Or how would you suggest, Sarah, that our listeners can follow along and sort of do the work alongside us as we're walking through it?
I think that's perfect what you suggested, that to listen and to notice what it's an interesting exercise in observing and listening. So listening to how we do it, and then just noticing what comes into their minds as well.
Hmm.
Listeners could have an example that goes along with you, or they could have like a disagreement. Oh, that's not how I see it. And so just to notice everything that comes up. And Byron Katie, who's the one who introduced the work to the world, she says, "Don't take my word for it. Just try it out." And I really love that, because if there's something that I say or something with this method that, or a thought that, okay, no, you can't, you shouldn't free yourself of guilt because you are guilty. Like it's stuff like this. If things come up for people, I really invite you to try out this method once you've heard and just see, see, don't definitely no need to take my word for it. And it's all about this method. It's not about any, person or right answer or correct conclusion. It's about trying the work for yourself on what's bothering you and just see what it does for you. So you can make your decisions on whether this method is like interesting or not from a place of direct experience rather than in the analytical mind. So I think it's wonderful that we'll try it, and I'm so interested to hear what is your thought you'd like to check out.
Right. Well, I'm in your hands, Sarah. So where do you think we should start?
Well, I mean, I had mentioned, I think, in an email to you that this idea of the collective and our responsibility to the collective is something that I carry myself, and I think your podcast is so much about how we can serve, how we can help, and I think your listeners care about that as well. And I think that's like it's a beautiful impulse, and it is universal, like to serve, to create, to exchange. That is kind of, to me, what the universe is. And we can turn that into suffering, in my experience, as well. This desire to serve, need to serve, or think we need to fix things. So I was wondering if you would be interested in doing I have a duty to the collective, if that resonates to you at all. And if it doesn't, I would love to hear something else. And for your listeners, what we're looking for is like a thought that we have that doesn't feel 100% good.
Hmm.
If it doesn't feel 100% good, if it creates any guilt or shame or anger or rumination or just whatever you define of as stress, that's a thought to just look at. And so this one, for me, I know it creates stress for me, this idea that I have a
Hmm.
duty to the collective. And so
Hmm.
if it does for you, I'm interested in that. And if it doesn't, I would love to hear anything else that pops into your mind that's like, oh, on that sort of note that I think your listeners, could relate to.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd say that one resonates with me. Would it be helpful to give some more context to it or make it really specific, like I feel like my duty is, or would it be better just to keep it more general, like just have a general duty to the collective?
I think for this, it would be wonderful if you could anchor yourself in general, if you could anchor yourself in a specific situation,
Hmm.
because some of these beliefs are so broad, right? So if you can think of any time that that thought has come up or a flavor of that thought with relation to any specific situation. So it could be something today that, you opened the news and you're like, oh my God, we have to do something about that. Or it could be, something 5 years ago or when you were a kid or anything. So anytime that that thought arose that you have a duty to the collective, I'd love to hear what comes to mind and a description, and then we'll anchor this questioning process with that.
Hmm. Okay. You sit with it for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll share this one and okay, I'll just share that I feel like I have a duty to achieve my fullest potential or like live out my destiny in order to serve the collective. And that's one that actually I've been bumping up against some questioning myself recently too.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
I
is
can
there a
say more if helpful, but
situation?
sorry.
Well, is there a situation you want to tie that to at all? Like where is, I'd love to know what's a time that showed up, that sort of feeling,
Well,
like what might prompt that to come up, reading something, hearing something, waking up, anything.
I'm supposed to give a talk in a few weeks, and the talk is on polarization and reducing political polarization and having constructive conversations. So I think that might be an area where I feel like, oh yeah, I really I have to bring something forward to people. I think that the stress for me, it's that the service part, it doesn't feel stressful. It's like, oh, I
Yes,
want to give something to people. But the part for me that feels stressful is that like I have to live up to something
yes,
for myself, something like that.
yes. Um, what about something like I have to do it right? And that just encompasses like, or, it depends on me or something, like with the work, we like to find fairly short sentences if possible, and fairly clear ones. So I think what you're tapping into is really good, and I think will resonate for a lot of people, and it resonates for me as well. So is there any other, because your original one was, I have a duty to live out my destiny in order to serve. And you're now, if we look at this talk that's coming up, is there any way you can sort of make that so, I have to do it right. If I need to communicate this message, or anything else, that anchoring yourself in, okay, this talk is coming up, and this feeling like you've got to do it right. You've got to live up to it. You've got to do your thing in order to communicate this important message. Any other kind of words or sentences that come to mind with that feeling of needing to live up to your destiny in order to serve the collective, with regards to this talk?
I have to do it right. That is a core one for me.
So let's choose one moment of preparation that you can remember. One time you were
Last week, just brainstorming, writing down ideas.
perfect. And can you tell me, were you in this chair? Like, were you in your living room? Were you out? Where were you in this? Just to put us in the place.
Right here at this desk. Um,
Okay.
yes.
And in the evening, in the morning, in the afternoon, do you remember?
Was it in the morning?
Okay, awesome. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take you back to in the morning last week, brainstorming for this talk upcoming on polarization. And the thought is there, I have to do it right. So the first question I'm going to ask you is it true? You're there in the chair, brainstorming, preparing. I have to do it right.
No.
No.
And just to add,
So,
can I add some
yes, please
context?
add, please.
Well, I
Yes.
think for me, having gone through the work, it feels like I can get to that no maybe a little bit easier, whereas that might have been a yes for me, um, maybe prior to doing the work.
So that's perfect. I'm going to ask you to give a little bit more of an answer then, if you don't mind. I'll just explain one thing for your listeners. I have to do it right. Can you, is it true? You gave us a no. The next question would have been, can you absolutely know that it's true? So the first question, is it true? Can you take me through the place where it was a yes to the place where you came to a no?
Hmm.
Right? Because when we start, when the stressful thought comes, it's a yes when it comes. Like, I have to do it right. It's a yes where that is. And then you sat and I asked you the question and you came to a no. So
Hmm.
take us on that transition from the yes to the no.
I have to do it right. There's this feeling of like tightness inside of me. And of course, I have to do it right. And it's kind of about me. And then the place where that drops off into a no, I feel like I'm just jumping into this like not knowing. Like there's something more. I'm open to the mystery of it, that I don't have all of the knowledge about what is good for me or for other people.
That's perfect. It's like a perfect demonstration because can is it true? That part of us that believes it might be like, yeah, it's true. I have to do it right. It's a talk. People are going to be listening. I have an important message to deliver. Yes, I have to do it right. And then the second question, can you absolutely know it's true, is where we look at that openness that you described, where it's like, oh, can I absolutely know that it's true? And that's where however hardened our belief is in something, we just keep moving our mind outwards and cosmic and bigger until we see, can I absolutely know it's true?
Hmm.
And so that's where the no can come up really very naturally in that second question, can you absolutely know it's true? And you showed us how when you're ready for it, you can go straight into the no in the first question.
Hmm. Beautiful.
So let's go to, so those were the first two questions. The third question is, how do you react when you believe the thought? And so you're going to go back to that place where it is a yes. How do you react when you believe the thought, I have to do it right? In your chair last week, brainstorming about the talk.
I feel tense. I feel almost this like squeezing, kind of choking sensation. And I worry about other people judging me and just blocked. I just creatively blocked.
And I'm just going to ask a couple of sub questions. Do you notice anything from the past come up or the future when you're believing I have to do it right? Notice if any images come up associated with that doing it right for the past or for the future.
And I'm seeing myself giving the talk and just this sense of wanting to be in control. And now I'm just having an image of childhood coming up, like in my bedroom in one of the houses I grew up in.
Mm-hmm. Where you needed to do it right, or wanting to please or wanting to control or anything sort of
Yeah, wanting
related.
to control.
And do you notice, how do you treat the talk itself? You're working on this talk, but how do you treat that talk? What's your relationship to the talk and the work you're doing when you're believing I have to do it right?
It's wanting
It's,
to control it. It's just wanting to be in perfect control of it. If that, I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. It's like I can notice when I believe I have to do it right. Could be even this podcast could be sharing about the work. I stop caring about my topic. So it's like I don't treat the topic as that interesting anymore.
Hmm.
It's really how I'm doing it and how I show up when I believe I have to do it right. It's almost like everything else fades away except for this control,
Mhm.
except for this need and responsibility. And
Mhm.
uh, and just seeing that, do you see anything about how you treat the audience that's going to hear your talk?
Hmm.
when when you're there brainstorming in your chair in the morning and you're like, what happens to the audience when you're believing I have to do it right?
Yeah, it's almost this like defensive posture or antagonistic, right? I have to prove something to them or um, have control. It feels very adversarial.
Right. Which is so amazing to see, right? Like, haven't met them yet, and you got to be on defense with the thought.
Yeah.
So now be there in your chair. Everything else is the same. You're still doing the talk. There's going to be an audience. You care about the subject and you care about communicating it. But now, who would you be without the thought that I have to do it right?
Be a lot freer. It'd be a lot more open and almost like a conduit for whatever wants to come through and be delivered.
Mm-hmm. You notice anything in your body, how it feels without that in your chest, without that there, I, without believing it at all. It's totally gone.
Yeah, I feel joyful. I feel happy and more energized. Like I want to move my arms around. I want to like, it's like there's more energy moving through.
Yeah. And for your listeners, again, when you're new to the work, it can be sometimes hard to get to that place. Like, who would I be without the thought? One of the things that I try on is I can imagine, like, let's say the talk's coming up, and who would I be without the thought I have to do it right? I kind of substitute something else for the talk. Like, I imagine I'm going to go to like a hot dog eating competition or something. I'm in it. And it's like, I don't know how many hot dogs I'm going to eat. Like, it's suddenly I can feel the playfulness and I can feel how fun it's going to be around all the other people, and people are watching me and they'll laugh with me or not. Like, it's like all the gravity disappears.
Hmm.
And then I bring that just gradually back to now it's the talk. Okay. It's not the hot dog eating competition. Now it's the talk. And then, it's almost like once my body's experienced the playful scenario, the non-threatening scenario, I can feel like, oh, it would feel like that if I didn't believe, I didn't have this heaviness about doing it right. And so I invite your listeners, like, that they can, if they get, if it's tricky to experience what it would be like without the thought, to find somewhere where they can have that feeling. And that's a way to kind of open that part of you and be like, that's what it would feel like,
Nice.
how much more fun.
That's really helpful.
So now let's try on the turnarounds. So the turnarounds are where you're, as you mentioned, the cognitive aspect. We're going to try on a few different ways of looking at your original stressful thought. So I have to do it right was the original. What's an opposite statement to that?
I don't have to do it right.
So sit with that, and I'd love you to find 3 examples of how that could be true, and maybe one of them in the situation, like right there in the chair. And then anything else that comes up that could be with regard to this talk, it could be with regard to anything that comes into your mind of, I don't have to do it right.
I don't have to do it right. People will still have their experience, whether or not I do it right. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but I don't have to do it right. Um, I trust that other people can take care of them. Who do I have to do it right for? Other people are going to be fine. So I think that's
Yeah.
one.
That's great. And how
Uh,
about in the chair in the morning, you're there brainstorming. In that moment, I don't have to do it right. What's an example of that?
um, even doing it, quote, wrong still opens up possibilities for newness or playfulness. Or actually, if I do it wrong, my experience is that usually the talks go better. Like if I don't have the pressure on myself and I don't have the pressure to do it right, actually it's more fun and I'm more present.
And I see another example. Would you be interested? Can I share it?
Please, please.
I don't have to do it right in that moment when I'm in the chair. It's forgetting that like the creative process has many iterations and drafts. And it's almost like in that moment when I'm in the chair thinking I have to do it right, I'm like, I can't do a draft. I have to have the final product right now.
Hmm.
And it's like, it's like, I don't have to do this draft right. Like I'm just playing around here. I have so much time, whether it's one day or 2 weeks or 6 months, like there's always time before the final product.
Hmm.
And we forget it in the creative process. And that burden of doing it right doesn't let us. It's like imagine if you had a student and they were working on something. You said, that better be right. I don't want to see it unless it's right. Don't like, is that right? You never would do that to a student. You're like, it's the
Hmm.
part of the process.
Hmm.
So I don't have to do it right as a reminder that it's not all weighing on this moment.
Hmm.
We forget, go into the mind. It's like, and right now I really, really, really don't have to do it right now in the chair at all. I got lots more chances to see how it's going.
So true. That's how things evolve anyway. I wouldn't want it to be right now
Yes.
because that precludes the next iteration and evolution of it.
Yeah. And exactly. And it's like this life is such a process, not a result. And all the great inventors and inventions and all the things, like they never are right from the beginning, and they never finish even when they are right. It's always an evolution.
Hmm.
And so I don't have to do right is like, oh, that's actually more natural than doing it right. That I don't have to do it right.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's nice.
And then so you started us on this, but try the next turnaround. I have to do it wrong. How might that be true?
I have to do it wrong. There is no right. So I literally have to do it wrong if there is no right.
Excellent.
Um, for me, I don't know if this is maybe just too, I don't know, maybe not grounded,
No, go
but
for you.
um, I have to do it wrong. Yeah, of course. This is a very core thing for me. I have to do it right. So this is very much a lesson for me to
Mm,
learn. Life is not going to get away with letting me just do things right. And think that I have to do things right. I have to do it wrong because I need to learn the lesson that like I don't have to do it right. So that's that's how I learned that is, to do it wrong, I guess. I don't know.
yeah. It's almost like it just won't be so scary after I've done it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like wrong. It's like, and just think of all the speakers you've ever listened to and all those impromptu moments that happen. The slide doesn't work, or they forget something, or they get an unexpected question, or or the power goes out. Like all of those moments are actually really interesting. Um, and often they're interesting for the audience, and and you as an audience member can sometimes see the speaker struggling with the stress of what's going wrong. And yet you as the audience member are like, oh, it's totally fine.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like, I have to do it wrong. Oh yeah, it's always really kind of interesting when things go off course in this
Hmm.
things I've listened to.
Hmm.
And also just I have to do it wrong again is like that part of life where, oh, it's so much suffering, but yet I always grow from it. Um, so if that's what it's going to be, that something's going to go wrong and it's going to feel bad, if I don't know how it will be, but if it does, like it's always it's always so far been growth for me, if you can see that here you are now today, everything that's ever gone wrong in your life, wrong, see how here you are. And so imagine where you'll be with everything else that goes wrong. It's sort of like I have to do it wrong is like, because it always goes, that evolution you're talking about.
Hmm. It's nice. Feels good.
So do you see any other turnaround? I see one, but it's kind of a Byron Katie-ish one. I'd be interested to see if you see anything else. I have to do it right. Another turnaround or opposite.
The only other one that I can think of is trying to turn it around to the other. I don't know if that makes sense. They have to
Sure.
do it right, or
Yes, try that on. I think that's interesting.
yeah, they have to do it right, meaning they have to take care of their own experience, I guess. It's really not up to me to do it right for somebody else. Like if it's
Mm,
whatever's right, if whatever I think is
mm,
right for someone else, I actually can't give them that rightness. They have to do it right, meaning they have to if it listen and interpret it, and it's only going to be right. They only have the power to make it right or to make it useful. I can't do that.
yeah. So it's like you're empowering your audience. And the other thing I see with they have to do it right, I notice how I'm putting a lot of pressure on my audience because they got to make me feel good about my talk. They got to show me I made a difference. It's like I forget that in that, along with that stress of I have to do it right, I'm also putting a lot of pressure on my audience to do it right.
Hmm.
And I'm worried about the pressure they're putting on me to be this great speaker, but I didn't notice that I'm putting a pressure on them to laugh and to be interested and not be on their phone. It's kind of like, oh, if I release them to do it right in the way you're talking about, own their own experience, they don't have to do it right. I get to go up there and talk and do whatever I want, and like they don't have to give me something back. I'm just there to give, and
Hmm.
they don't. So it's sort of like notice for me what comes up with that they have to do it right is noticing how much pressure I'm putting on my audience as well as myself, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that
Nice.
I don't need to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really helpful, Sarah, thinking about it in that way. Just not needing to get anything from them or in return.
Yeah. Because you see, you don't really need it. It's like the mind thinks we need it, but it's like you are like talking about this thing you're so passionate about and have a lot to share, and they're going to own their own experience, and then you just get to have a great time, and they
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing.
So then the last sort of one that I would love to play with you is my thinking has to do it right. Because with the Byron Katie, with the work of self-inquiry, we sometimes kind of separate the thoughts that aren't reality from reality. And one of the ways to do that is to look at, okay, my thinking in this situation, whether it's in the chair or whatever, my thinking has to do it right. How could that be as true or more true than I have to do it right?
This feels like, yes, in my thinking has to do it right. My thinking is that ego, that part of me has to do it right if it wants to be in control. Sure.
Mhm.
But that's my thinking. And the belief that I have to do it right, or something underneath that has to do it right, that doesn't feel that doesn't feel true to me.
Yeah, yeah, it's like, you know how the brain works more than I do. And it's like that is what our thinking is programmed to do, is like do it right, fix, like avert any potential danger or problem. Like it's like we're wired to see threat and avoid it and learn from it and create patterns. And so it's like it's so natural that my thinking has to do it right. Like that's where it seems life or death is, in those neurological, in that wiring kind of thing. And all that's happening is when I'm in that chair, I'm getting confused between like the narration of the ego, where it's like, yeah, we have to do it right. Okay, we got to get that right. We got to get that right. And me, because I actually don't have to do it right. Like everything's fine. But my
Yeah.
thinking does really have to do it right, because that's how it's programmed. And so it's like that's way I can have this relationship with my thinking where it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's so I get that's what's happening. And you're just bringing your thinking back in line with reality so that it's like, okay, good. I've alerted you to the threat. I've said we got to watch out for this. You've listened, you've paused and gone, okay, I'm believing this, questioned it, and now we're all back on track. And so it's just like it's just my thinking having to do it right, because that is just so deeply ingrained in so many of us that we have to do it right. We've just learned it many times and reinforced it, and we reinforce it on other people. So of course that's living in us, that my thinking has to do it right.
Mhm. I'm just recognizing how this work often leads to, it often reveals other thoughts or beliefs that are connected to or underneath those beliefs. And I think for the sake of our conversation, I won't get into, in detail, but I'm realizing what else is coming out for me too. As we complete that, there's something deeper under that layer as well that could definitely use some inquiry. But Sarah, I'm already feeling some like relief. I can feel my parasympathetic nervous system working um, right now. And it's with a sense of like relaxation, getting hungry. So that's always a sign for me that parasympathetic is kicking on. So yeah, so it feels very like refreshing and light. Um, I just wanted to say that.
That's wonderful. That's always to me it's like you can feel it in your body when you're doing the work, and you're open to it. You can feel it in your body.
Hmm.
Um, and I love what you said about underlying beliefs, because I actually find the more work I do, the more I see all these other beliefs. But it's like it's okay, because it's just like, oh, okay. Like sometimes I'm in a state of anxiety or anger or depression that's up high, and then I do the work and it takes me down a notch, and then I see all the other things, and it's like, okay, I can even get more relief.
Hmm.
Now that I see all this, there's so much potential for all these little areas. And also now I see why that was bothering me so much, because it was was underlying other things. And so plus to me, it can bring some compassion to the beliefs that you have running, because once we understand it's not personal, it's automatic, it's ingrained, and it's just kind of we just haven't noticed it, then we can bring that to anything that's bothering us, and be compassionate with the part of us that does believe those things, and let it speak and let it come out, and be with it. And then feel the relief if we see, oh, okay, we see something new.
Thank you for sharing this really wonderful practice with us. Where can people learn first more about the work? And then I'd also love for you to share how people can connect with you as well.
So to learn about the work is very easy. It's thework.com. And everything, the Byron Katie is the woman's name who brought the world this work. It's she doesn't trademark it. It's not about, there's no personality part of it. It's really the process, these 5 questions. So you can see the questions there. You can get free worksheets. You can listen to podcasts with Byron Katie herself. You can read her books. Loving What Is a wonderful book that I recommend. And so that's a very easy way to just go straight to the technique. And if you want to learn more directly from me, I put on workshops, I work with clients. I have a kind of posts I do on Instagram. I'm trying to figure out ways to, share this technique with the world where, or, again, the world, here's me going into my aggrandizing or whatever, but I'm want to find ways to share this with people who don't necessarily see the relationship between positive global change and inner spiritual work. I want to reach people. So I'm using Instagram a little bit for that. So at Self Inquiry with Sarah is my Instagram handle. My website is sarahclimenhaga.ca. And I said it's phonetically, so but really they'll just have to read it in your podcast description to look that up. And I have a little guide I send people if they want to know, a primer for how to do the work. There's so much out there, and once your mind is open to this, you're gonna find a lot of opportunities to practice it. But go to thework.com to get your spreadsheets and everything, and then come over to sarahclimenhaga.ca or at Self Inquiry with Sarah to find out, my specific approach with it.
Awesome. And I'll put all that in the show notes. Anything else that you want to say or share with our audience today?
I guess just that that the listener has incredible amounts of wisdom within them. And this method, what I like about it is it's getting the wisdom from ourselves. And we can keep gathering data from the outside world, but the true wisdom is within ourselves. And I love how this method lets us see our own wisdom and possibilities and connection. And so, there's so much, there's lots of great advice out there. But yeah, I just really want to encourage everyone to do this exploration so they can find all that is so amazing within them.
Sarah Climenhaga, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your wonderful wisdom with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful for me.